What is going on, guys? It's your boy Void here, and today I want to talk about the software engineering technical interview and how we can best approach these to ensure that we are able to move on in the rounds of some of these companies, as well as how to get these offers. That's the main part of getting a software engineering job, having to go through these technical interviews. You don't have to be a great software engineer to get a good software engineering job. You just have to get through the technical interviews. So this is really important, and let's dive right into it. Technical interviews usually start by you're on a phone call or in a room with one other person, typically, and this person is going to introduce themselves. Usually they're going to say, "Hi, I'm Christian, and I work for YouTube. I'm on the whatever team that supports internal services," or something of the sort. And then you are often expected to give a little quick introduction on yourself. So this shouldn't be long at all. You don't want to take away too much time from the actual technical interview, because that will give you less time to actually problem solve. So make sure that before any interviews, you kind of have a little introduction on yourself down. If you have a hard time talking about yourself, make sure you actually prepare for this, and you can use the same 2-minute spiel that you give to every company, basically. Hi, I'm Christian. I am a super senior at the University of Texas, looking for new grad positions. Some of my past work has included game streaming from mobile devices using Android and Java. So that's a quick little 45-second spiel I like to give on myself, and it tells them who I am, what I'm looking for, and what I have done, which that's a pretty good intro. You don't have to go too in-depth with this. So after you introduce yourself, the interviewer is going to be like, "Okay, hi Christian, we have the same name, but here's a technical problem, and can you see it?" If it's on a shared document, and you'll be like, "Yeah, I can see it." And typically they're either going to read it out to you or you read it out. Once you have this problem in front of you, read it out pretty slowly, take your time with it, and make sure you understand the problem. Now, sometimes they will give you a default test case, expected output for a given input. Sometimes they will not. More often than not, they will. So usually the one they give you is fairly simple. Once you've read through the problem, you want to first make sure that you clarify any confusion you have about the problem, because there really isn't time to code a solution for something that isn't even the question that they're asking you. So make sure you clarify in the beginning. It will save you more headache than not, and it will make you look like you're very forward thinking. You can say things along the lines of, "Possible that I'm given null," or, "Oh, should this be returning a array list?" Or, "Oh, can I return a generic list collection?" Something along those lines. You can also say something like, "Oh, if I'm given this parameter, am I assuming that this will fit into memory?" Or anything along those lines. So just make sure that you are clarifying any assumptions you make, and clarifying any constraints, any confusions you might have, as well as identifying edge cases. So if you're given a problem where in their sample test case they gave you all positive numbers, you can ask the interviewer, "Hey, I noticed this test case is all positive numbers. Will this be the case always?" And they'll say yes or no. And that should give you some hints as to how to solve the problem, because typically these constraints, they're not there for nothing. They're there for you to utilize and to be able to code a solution around those constraints. So right after you're done clarifying the question, we want to create our own test cases. So these test cases should be maybe 2 or 3 of them. just to make sure that you're covering like various cases. They should also not be too similar to each other if you're doing like 2 of them, because you want to show that you are able to test and that you are testing a range of inputs. So if, let's say, maybe you test an input with like a negative and a positive or something along those lines, you also want to make sure that you're handling any edge cases, such as like an empty string or a null or a 1-node tree. So now that you've created some test cases, what I would do is I would try to solve them by hand. I would actually go through my test case with like either my Google Doc or like a whiteboard, and I would physically solve the problems with my hands and figure out what the output should be, confirm the output with the interviewer, and once you've gone through that process with both your test cases, or 3 of your test cases in some cases, now you actually get into the part where you are solving the problem. And this is the hard part. This is the part that you typically have to prepare for the most. If you don't know how you should prepare, check this video out I made. I'll post it right here on the screen. Solving the problem gets a lot easier once you've figured out your constraints, as well as walk through some test cases manually, because typically once you've done it manually, you can kind of try to translate how you would do it into code. So hopefully at this point you either have, the best case is you've thought of the optimized solution already. You already know what you need to do. Maybe you need to throw a hash map in there or hash set or whatever. But yeah, that's the ideal case. Like if you're able to optimize it right off the bat, that's awesome. Just express to the interviewer that, oh, I thought of this naive way, but then there's this optimal way to do it. So I'm going to do it the optimal way. Now, this doesn't always happen. Some problems are harder than others. So maybe you haven't thought of the optimal way, and that's okay. So if you haven't thought about the optimal way, I would state the naive way that you've thought of. Indicate to the interviewer that you think that this is the naive approach. So you don't want to, depending on time, you don't want to implement it right away. Even if you don't have the optimal solution in mind, you can say, okay, well, I think this part of the problem where we have to loop through everything is really the bottleneck for the problem. Then you can try to optimize around the bottleneck. Sometimes you still won't be able to think of an optimized way even once you've identified a bottleneck, and that's okay. They'll either tell you to go ahead and code the naive solution and then we'll iterate over that, or they'll tell you something along the lines of, okay, well, here's a hint. The bottleneck can be removed if we were to do what operation? And then you're thinking to yourself, oh, I can remove the bottleneck. How do I do that? And once you're thinking about how to get past that bottleneck, you can think in terms of, okay, well, I know hash map, that's gonna map these 2 things. I really don't need to do that because this problem only involves like numbers and there aren't like no repeatings, no frequencies, nothing like that. Just make sure you are expressing this to the interviewer, even if what you're thinking is incorrect and you recognize that it is incorrect. Just tell them why it doesn't work. If you can tell the interviewer what you thought of and why you know that isn't the answer, that's good too, because it shows your thought out loud. You're expressing it out loud, and you're expressing that you can think about different solutions and recognize why they are incorrect quickly, which is a very valuable skill. You always hear about the whole fail fast, so that's a really good thing to do. Now, if you can't think of a naive solution, that's okay too. Make sure you go through that same process of, oh, here's the solution I was thinking of, but that wouldn't work because of this. Now, that still shows thought. Not 100% of the interview is not just did they get the optimal solution? It is also, how did they think? Was their thought process good? And did they show some technical knowledge? So in going through your incorrect solutions and identifying why they are incorrect, you are still showing some level of technical knowledge. Cool. So let's say at this point, maybe you got a hint, maybe you got two. That's okay. But you've gotten a solution. What do you do right after you've gotten a solution? Do you say, all right, here I am. Here's my solution. I put the return statement. All right, I'm done. Locked in. Bam. We're good to go, interviewer. No. You want to use those test cases and manually go through your program. Now, I like to do it line by line. Sometimes time is a little bit of a constraint, so you got to do it a little faster. But I would really try to go through one test case line by line to make sure that it works and verify that with your interviewer. You can go line by line through one test case and then kind of skim through the other test cases. And then you can tell the interviewer, okay, well, it passed for these 3 test cases. I believe that my method is working. And then you can preemptively mention the time complexity and the space complexity and be like, oh, okay, and I think this is a pretty good solution as it is log n time, which is the best because we are searching through, you get the point. Or maybe say, oh, I used a little more space. I have n space taken up, but that helped me reduce my time here. And you're really able to talk about those trade-offs. That shows even more technical knowledge. So that's a really good thing to do. At this point, they'll either tell you to iterate on your solution by suggesting something along the lines of, oh, well, that's good, but could we do better on this? Or like they won't tell you like, oh, that's not the optimal, but they'll say, could we do better? Like something like that, you know? Or they might even give you a second problem depending on how you are doing on time. And that's a pretty good indicator. That means you got through the first problem pretty fast and you did it in a way that they consider acceptable to move on from that problem. Not all companies will ask a second problem. Some of them will kind of debrief afterwards, see if you have any questions for them. And at this point in the interview, you're past the tough part. You can breathe. So just you can take a deep breath there, and now you're not completely off the hook, but you've finished the technical portion. So at this point, you should have a question or two for the interviewer, either regarding company culture or maybe the location that they're in or perhaps the specific team that they're on. Any of these questions are really good. Just make sure you ask them something about themselves or their experiences with that company, because people like to talk about themselves. People find it easier to talk about themselves. So make sure you play into that. And generally, if you show interest in them and the company, that will make the interviewer like you a little more. So make sure you ask like a question or two at the end if you do have time. So that's really about it. The biggest part of this is really just the solving the problem part, where you either have a naive solution, an optimal solution, or no solution, and you're going to get hints there, and that's okay. It's better to get something with a hint than not, and if one hint can unblock you, that's a pretty good indicator that you might be a decent teammate to work with. It's not like software engineers don't ask each other for help to unblock each other. It's perfectly normal. Just get through this process and you're gonna be all right. One last thing, if this helped you at all, don't forget to leave that like or subscribe, and you guys will be acing your interviews. You'll be acing the resume. And I want to help you guys ace as many things about computer science and finance as possible. See ya.